Hi, I'm Bridget Price.
And I'm Lauren Kemp.
And this is Entrepreneurs in Progress. You know the adage, those who can't do, teach? Well, the hiring process is loosely based on this idea, except often as early entrepreneurs, we actually do it all, until we can't anymore. That's where hiring comes into play. And while it seems easy to hire skilled workers to help you out, it's anything but easy. Hiring is often a mystery, a game of clue that you're trying to figure out. So Laura and I will talk at length about the hiring process and if we're close to solving it. Let's get started. Lauren, for you and Brian, with regard to the hiring process, what about this process has been super important or pivotal as you both grow Rotiv?
The hiring process is so important for us because we're a small team. Anyone we bring on is going to have a big impact on the success or failure of our business or our ability to scale, because, who you bring on impacts your productivity, your company culture, your delivery of services. So bringing anyone onto your business, especially when you're in the beginning stages, is a really big deal and has a really big impact.
Yeah. Hiring has been such a huge thing for me and Marcus, and I call it a mystery, but really as we are learning more and more about hiring, it can be this formulaic process that can work time and time again. But we've had some unique challenges sourcing our staff, our cleaners, and we've taken a lot of hits along the way. We've learned a lot. And it's still one of the things in our business that really stresses us out.
Yeah,
for real.
And I think too that the hiring process is where a lot of small businesses tend to wing it in the beginning. Usually the larger you get, you have more established processes. But obviously you and I think it's super important to have a really solid hiring process and not do something ad hoc, because it's also the potential candidate's first experience with you, and you're trying to sell working at your company to them as much as they are trying to sell them working at your company to you.
Yeah, and it's so funny because Marcus didn't actually wing hiring at first. He was very methodical, but it was hilarious because he was using some of his corporate background in terms of hiring our first set of cleaners. And we laugh about it to this day, but he had a question on there on one of the original applications. If you were a cereal, what would you be, or something like that?
I like those fun ones. I ask, what is your favorite Disney character? And it includes the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Star Wars universe, because they're both owned by Disney. So I like those little personality type questions.
Yeah, I think there was another layer to it, something going further into explaining why you chose that cereal.
Oh, like a deeper meaning.
Yeah, and it did not land. And it was so funny because we saw that's when we saw a lot of people abort that application. They'll get to that and then they would leave. It was funny to think about it now, and we can laugh about it in hindsight, but he really just took some questions that he got from other people in the cleaning industry, judged it up himself, and it was just okay, let's really get to what we really need to know about these people to hire them. So yeah, that was Made Easy 1.0 before Made Easy was 2.0. But yeah, in our industry, the hiring process is completely different. And I think for a lot of companies, depending on what needs you service, the hiring process is going to be somewhat custom, but there's still some pieces that are kind of mainstays, right?
Yeah.
Their information, their experience, that type of information.
And what I think too is that you don't realize how much goes on behind the scenes with a hiring process. I experienced it obviously from the job hunter side, but when it was our turn to come up with our own hiring process, there's actually so much thought and research and effort behind it. It took us so much longer to get up and running, because you think, you just have a few interviews and evaluate from there. But because we wanted to be very intentional about the process and making sure that we got the best candidates to fit our needs in business, it was a lot of work that I never realized I would have to do.
Yeah, so much work. It's humbling for sure, because I'm not sure if you've experienced this in your previous places of employment, Lauren, where you're a little judgy on some of the people that the company chose to hire, or if they had difficulty hiring somebody or like, why is it so hard? Go find somebody. But I've learned that people like recruiters, they've always said like sometimes finding specific workers or skilled workers is like finding a needle in the haystack. And operating our small business, we got to see that firsthand. Like finding reliable talent with the right set of skills, the right teachability, like willing to be coached, is really hard.
I think too, a lot of it starts with the job description. So you're like, during this whole hiring process, you're trying to qualify people as they go along each stage. It starts out with how much thought you put into the job description because you want it to be broad enough to catch a wide enough net, but you also want to weed out people who aren't going to be a good fit. So, I mean, I spent a lot of time just like also looking into how to remove bias from our hiring practices, which includes word choice in job descriptions, having standardized interviews, having a work sample portion, whether or not to include salary ranges, what qualifications, what do they need to have, like certification wise, what do we prefer they have, what are the skills necessary. And even with all of that thought and effort into it, it was so different from when our employee actually started, because we realized, oh, these are the different things that you need to actually be successful in this role. The things we thought we needed were different from what we ended up realizing you need in a small business consulting setting.
How long did you all decide, or how long were you working in Rotos before you started thinking about hiring your first employee and going through that initial process? Or is hiring something you both thought about from the beginning, or is it like a wait and see what our needs are?
Yeah, it's been an as needed basis, because I mean, we didn't start thinking about it until we started hitting 30K for 3 months in a row, because you know, the beginning of our business, we were just struggling to gain traction in sales, and then finally when we hit that milestone and it was consistent and we're like, okay, we need more help, we've hit the top of what the two of us can do, we feel pretty confident that we could bring someone on. So it wasn't until month like 7 or 8 that we started really thinking about, okay, like what would our hiring process look like? How can we scale the business beyond the two of us now that we've reached this point? How about you guys?
So in the very beginning, we had to hire for 2 positions, essentially. The first obvious position was for cleaning teams or cleaners, professional cleaners. And it was it was hard, because in the cleaning industry, especially when you're new and you're not yet credible, the jobs aren't pouring in. So for us to start a cleaning business without any cleaning experience, without us actually being the cleaners, that's why there was a Made Easy 1.0 and now a Made Easy 2.0, because we were getting people interested in the job because of what we were paying, but we didn't have jobs yet. And so obviously those individuals or applicants moved on because they couldn't wait around for us to secure our first cleaning job. So in our industry, that's why it's very common to not hire employees first, but to start off with contractors. And so we basically in 2.0, we learned from my first mistake in terms of not really understanding the bandwidth or when we would need cleaners before our first cleaning. And what we did was focus on getting our first cleaning job and then having accessible or ready to work or ready to go contractors. Still tough because our pay was very incentivizing. Like people wanted to work with us. They wanted to get started. But again, we were scared that they would be waiting too long before they can get to their first cleaning job. So those 2 pieces we were trying to work simultaneously, but it was just hard to say or hard to tell. But once we got that first sale, it started to pick up. And our first month, we did like $1,300 in business, which is really enough work for maybe 2 contractors, considering that they're working on their own thing full time. And then slowly we got to 3, and then 5, and then 8 and 10,000 a month. And so we're basically just trying to determine when we need to hit the pedal and then when we needed to pull back. It was very tough because in those first few months, we'd hit a peak month and then it'd go back down, or it was constant back and forth, like a rubber band game, kept snapping back and forth, back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like one of the first roles we hired for, obviously. The second role that we were hiring for was for someone to answer the phone. Initially, we also hired a phone answering service. So a company that just enlists people to answer phones for your business. Mm-hmm. They literally take the customer's name, take a message and what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. They're supposed to have access to things like your website so they can give initial pricing. They should have access to other service detail information that will be relevant to the customer in case they ask questions. But what we found was that the phone answering service was not that apt in answering these tough questions, and so many leads were seeping through. It was like mind numbing. It made you felt like we felt through our hearts and our throats because we saw how many leads slipped through. Mm-hmm. And we had this phone answering service 4 or 5 months into the business, maybe close to 6. So we just were like, oh my God, we were surprised, quite honestly, that we got so many bookings through this answering service because of what was going on. And so that was another tough learning lesson for us. Sometimes when you outsource important positions or jobs, like even just answering the phone, especially for a service industry, it's tough to have someone take customers' information that knows nothing about your business. If they're not vested to learn about your business or even incentivized because they're answering phones for 3 other businesses at any given time.
So this is why you chose to hire people to answer your phones.
Yeah. So we then end up hiring a virtual assistant who we hired to answer the phones. And we've had some interesting virtual assistants. And that in itself was also a learning process because we found out that virtual assistant does not mean they can assist on everything. You have to still have a specific job description, duties, responsibilities. And you are definitely have to check in on them and make sure that they're trained all the way up.
Yeah, I want to get back to the specific hiring process that you guys go through. And I think one of the things that people don't also realize is how much thought we put into the candidate experience. Because usually you're thinking about it just from the business side and like what we need to do in order to hire the right person and what's that experience like for us. But I think that our companies really do try to make the candidate experience a good one too. And it matters again, because this is their first interaction with your business, your company, and you're trying to also sell them on joining your business. So what are some of the things that you and Marcus do at Made Easy that are for the benefit of the candidates and make the candidate experience going through your hiring process better?
The biggest thing is trying to make this process as automated and streamlined as possible and efficient. So in our industry, the types of people who are professional cleaners or working in a labor industry, they aren't used to what we might be familiar with the hiring process. There typically isn't like 3 interviews, a group interview, this prolonged process that for people like us, we would probably the hiring process could take a month or something like that. No, with our professional cleaners, it's not the case. They want to be hired almost same day. Now, it's not the same day, obviously, because we have to vet, check references, go through background checks, all of that. But we try to make it as quickly as the candidate is moving. So if they can get everything done within 3 days, they're hired within 3 days. If they have everything scheduled and they follow up with what our next steps are pretty quickly, they apply, let's say on a Friday, get a call that day, set up an interview for early the following week. If everything moves as we plan it to move, they'll have confirmation of employment by Wednesday or Thursday, essentially.
Yeah.
Super fast.
I think that being prompt and responsive and communicative is definitely one of those things that makes the candidate journey better. Just from, my experience, it sucks when you're waiting around sometimes for weeks to hear back from a company. And so you just want to know yes or no, and then you have to keep following up. So that's definitely one of the things that was very on about was when I get a response, try and be like, hey, you're either getting a link to schedule for a phone screen or it's not a fit, and trying to always respond as quickly as possible and making that a priority so it's a good experience for those going through. Having easy scheduling, make it easy to schedule meetings. Other little things that are part of the candidate experience to make it better is we don't negotiate salaries. We tell them like, this is the salary for the role. And one of the things that feels so common sense is just like making them fill out their information only once. You know, those annoying ass portals where you're like, they're like, upload your resume. Yep, and then you have to still fill out your information like 2 or 3 times after that. And it's just,
for our experience, for our cleaners, we don't even ask for a resume. They have an application form. It's a one-time deal. That's all they have to do. And we don't have them double back. And so like, that's also something that we were considering as well, was just making sure that the process makes sense to our professional cleaners. A lot of them aren't familiar or don't use technology in the same capacity that we do every day. So thinking about that, a lot of our apps have to be mobile friendly because they don't usually work from a computer. And so a lot of consideration went towards that as well. And we're still learning how to improve that candidate experience. We're still getting feedback about how to make it better. And it's hard because sometimes you have to balance out what you need to, gain information. For example, knowing how much you're spending per candidate or per lead or what the conversion is. And it's hard to maneuver around some of the feedback that the candidates prefer, but we take all of that feedback very seriously because we want to improve it.
What softwares do you use to help with the hiring process?
We've just recently switched over to an applicant tracking system. And basically it's like a dashboard or a project management tool of some sort that allows us to have all of our applicants funnel in from our application into this portal. We actually have a candidate score, a scoring metric. So if they score high enough, they're immediately moved over to a qualified section of the portal. If they fall slightly below it, they fall into a to be reviewed type of column. And then we can check to see if maybe one of the answers that they submitted just didn't work out. Like, for example, there's a scoring on education. College is the highest score, but obviously if you have a high school diploma, we don't have that impact the score too greatly, but things like that. And so that's been really helpful. It also allows us to schedule the interview from that portal, and they get an email and an SMS update with their interview details. So that's really nice to have it all in one space. And I think, Lauren, for our industry as compared to yours or maybe others, the good thing with us in terms of why our hiring process is so fast and swift is, in our industry, we always have to be hiring. Turnover is high, attrition is high, just because of the nature of the business and because we're competing with gig economies now.
That's a good point.
And your process with hiring your employee might look a little different, but we have more room to hire more than one person. And so we can make the necessary adjustments there.
Yeah, we use a candidate management tool where we can move people along the stages and keep track and send messages and have templated, messages ready for us to go. So that was pretty nice. But yeah, you bring up a good point. We aren't always hiring like we haven't been for almost a year now.
Yeah.
And we're hoping for less turnover. We haven't had any churn yet. But I think too, you've talked about using contractors or full-time employees. So I was very adamant on hiring a full-time employee just because, having worked agency life, there was a certain level of response time and service, and just there were a lot of good reasons for why I felt we needed someone long-term, because also we're looking for like high-skilled technology consultants. And my view is still that like the goal is to invest in that person and to have them grow and learn in the company and hopefully stay with us for a while.
Yeah.
But then you run into the issue when you have down months and you're like, oh my God, I thought we had an okay onboarding. We definitely need to improve our training. We needed to improve like just filling them up with work. And then it's been a struggle for us trying to make sure that they have enough work and are able to learn, and that we even have our processes written down. I can definitely see why in the beginning people use contractors because
it gives you that space to grow into your business and into a potential employee. I mentioned before on our podcast that we've extended employment offers to our contractors who have been with us for a really long time. And we wanted to do it sooner.
Yeah.
I'll make that clear. But we definitely, again, were struggling with making sure that we weren't over promising and under delivering, essentially. So that's a really great point that you raised.
Yeah, we found the problem though we actually tried to hire a part-time contractor earlier this year, and we barely got any candidates. So that's like the other side of it too, is when you're choosing between hiring someone full-time or part-time, the vast majority of people are looking for a full-time job. So we also found that we really limited the talent, the people that were willing to accept a part-time contractor job. So we're still trying to figure it out.
That's hard because I'm pretty sure you all need the support, which is why you're looking in the first place. And I think people, obviously, when they're looking for employment, they are looking for security, stability. They want dependability and predictability, all the ilities. And when you're growing, you don't want to necessarily highlight that in your job description or scare potential candidates away by saying, hey, we need the extra support, but we're still unsure if it's going to be full time. We want it to be full time. We expect it to be full time, but this is part time right now. And again, that can make some people nervous. And I think a lot of companies get really lucky sometimes when they find that individual who's also just looking for the same thing. But it's really hard to find in that scope when it's just a part-time situation.
Yeah, not only that, so you're already a small business with no brand recognition, and you're lucky to get some quality candidates. And then on top of that, if you're like, oh, we're only hiring for part-time, it's shit, we're limiting it even further. So I feel like there are companies that I've worked for where it's like they are inundated. They have so much great talent to choose from, and they can have a very kind of cutthroat view of employees and be like, oh, if you're not making it, there's somebody who's just as great or even better coming up behind you. And I feel like with small businesses, it's you got to make the most with what you got, and you don't have nearly as many options. And if something's not working, you got to work your butt off to figure out how to make it work because you're in it now.
You've made the commitment.
Yeah.
Same. Again, we know that what drew a lot of applicants to us is the pay that we were paying. It was significantly higher than what other companies were offering. But I will say this, we were soliciting or trying to source our candidates from job boards that were designed for employees. So imagine trying to find contractors on Indeed. We used Indeed for a large period of time, but it just was not the right platform for us. But Indeed had the highest quality of applicants at the time. So it was really tough. And so we'd have to, even though it's all throughout our job post that it's a contract position, 1099, people would still apply. And a lot of people who have traditionally worked as employees don't understand contractor agreements. They don't understand what that means. They don't understand not having taxes taken out of their check and being responsible for paying it at the end of the year. So there was an education component that we had to introduce. There was another weeding out process that we had to introduce. Some of it came more later than I would have liked. But again, sometimes too, people are so enthralled by the money-making opportunity, they'll skip past all of that and either hope to convince us to make them employee or think that it's not that huge of a difference or that type of thing. But yeah, we were struggling because we weren't going to the right places or platforms to find our contractors. And that still is a challenge.
Yeah.
A lot of contractors they're contractors for a reason. Those who understand the relationship, they want to work for themselves. And so recently we have found a lot of decent success with Craigslist, but we are going to go back and explore Angie's List, Care. We're going to see, you can never give up on these platforms. You have to just keep tweaking and you have to just accept that sometimes you have to go through a lot of unqualified applicants before you can get a couple of gems. But those gems will definitely pay off in the value that you get from them.
Absolutely. So I want to talk now what are both of our companies' specific hiring processes look like, because they're obviously very different based on the job that we're hiring for.
Yeah.
So for example, like at Rotive, we did 3 remote interviews. There's only me and Brian anyway. So like, how many interviews can you possibly do? But it started with a phone screen with me. I would vet the candidates and then I would kick them over to Brian if they passed for the more in-depth formal interview that you think of when you're interviewing for corporate jobs. And then the final interview was a demo to both of us. So the point of the final demo was to show whether or not they could do the job. So the job is, you know, a consultant role that's client facing, explaining technology to our clients. So we gave them a prompt, essentially, explain to us how to do XYZ. And it was something related to Pardot or Salesforce. And all they had to do is walk us through as if we were clients. We had our process, and then we also clearly explained the process in the beginning so the candidates knew what to expect, and it was standardized. It was pretty streamlined as far as it went, and our goal was to hire within 6 to 8 weeks, which we were able to do, which is kind of a fast turnaround. I didn't think, I thought that would be like, I thought that would just be like forever. And I hate as a candidate waiting around for 2 months. Man, if you have to start job hunting like 3 or 4 months in advance if you want a job by like the time you want to quit.
A certain time frame.
Yeah. And so turns out 2 months is actually pretty fast because there's so many people that you have to interview and vet and then do your
Do you recall how many people you and Brian interviewed in that process?
Ooh, I think we had around 30 applicants, maybe 35. I think they got halved as they made it through each stage. I think for the final stage, we had maybe 3, maybe 2, only 2 or 3 that actually made it to the final stage. Okay. But yeah, I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but basically we started 30 and then I think it became like 15 made it to the next round, and then 7 made it to the next round, and then maybe 3 made it to the final round.
Yeah, that's 30 applicants, and you interviewed all of them?
No. So half of them made it to the phone screen.
Oh, okay. But 15 is still a lot.
Oh, really?
You think it was, I guess not if they just made it to the phone screen, but how many of those 15 made it to the more in-depth interview with Brian?
About half of them. So Brian interviewed about 7 or 8 of them. And the phone screen was just like a 30-minute phone screen to just get a feel for them and also pitch the business a bit. And just that's what it is. It's a phone screen to see if they will move on into the regular interview process.
Did you expect more applicants in that process, or were you and Brian both satisfied with the 30 to 35 applicants that you received?
It's not so much the number of applicants that matter so much as the quality of applicants. Quality-wise, I felt like our job description did a really good job of, like I said, casting a wide enough net, but also being narrow enough to get the more quality applicants, the more qualified people for the position. So again, it's not so much the quantity, it is the quality. So by the end of the process, we didn't feel like we had a ton of like options, but we had a few. Okay. So we felt good about that. If our first person had turned down the offer, like we felt good that we had a second person and maybe even a third, but at least we had a couple of options that we felt good about.
So with that insight around the quality of the applicants that you and Brian both vetted and who you ultimately interviewed and who made it to the final rounds, is there anything that you and Brian have reflected on that you would have done differently to maybe get a different segment of applicants? Or do you feel like you and Brian did, what you guys had or what you offered was the right, or how you went about the process was correct, knowing what you know now?
I think there's always room for improvement. We didn't even do any ads. We didn't sponsor any of our job postings.
That's impressive.
There's definitely other recruiting tactics. Like we didn't do any outbound reach. We could have been reaching out and DMing people or trying to convince others and have like targeted applicants, which I know some people do. So we did not do that, and it turned out fine. But yeah, there's definitely a place where we can do better. I think the hard part is just usually by the time you need to hire, you are drowning in work, and it's hard to, at least for us, it was hard to make sure that it's hard to time it, because if you bring on someone too early, then you won't have enough work and you'll be burning through money. And if you bring on someone too late, you're already drowning.
It's that line, that treading that thin line. Can you go into the specifics of what you were looking for in this employee outside of their ability to be able to teach or talk to the software and consult? Was there any soft skills or any other hard skills that you and Brian were looking for that you found? And then was there anything afterwards that you technically didn't find but have been forced to train up?
Some of the hard skills we were looking for was product knowledge, being able to walk people through, like basically consult, basically be able to teach others. Softer skills would be like communication, and are they like personable? Do they know how to take care of clients? So that kind of attitude of just being like, okay, if I don't know the answer, like I'll find out. Or it's almost like customer service a bit, but dealing with clients.
Yeah.
We required that they had at least one certification, whether it be Salesforce admin or a Pardot admin. So those were some of the things that we were looking for. And then one of the things we realized after hiring is a skill where it's like problem solving on your own. We've been training this culture and idea of, okay, when you run into a roadblock, what are the steps you take to figure out the problem? We realize that if you don't have solid processes, you do need someone more independent and able to problem solve. But you should have good processes, because that's the way you'll be able to scale. That one was like, we're teaching the skill, but also is really on us to have better processes. And we didn't have anything written down. Brian thought that this person was just going to learn through osmosis and watching and shadowing. And I think, no. Because that's the way he learns,
that's
though.
The thing.
Like, Brian's able to pick up stuff just by watching someone do it, and he can repeat it. I'm like, I'm going to write down verbatim each individual step, so then I don't have to come to you again for how to do this.
It's funny because I feel like that is how we were, I don't know, trained, for lack of better words, in our previous places of employment. Like, we have a wiki that you discussed, but you kind of got to figure it out on your own. That means finding even the right person to ask if ultimately you get stuck, because sometimes your direct supervisor isn't the person you're going to always ask, but finding other people around you, or just having that initiative is what I think a lot of employers prefer, and showing that they can problem solve or fact find on their own without any prompting. But you're right, because that usually was a cover up for not having systems and processes in place, or incomplete processes, unfinished policies, things like that. And I think, unfortunately, when you lead with that way, we've found that you do set people up to fail, essentially. And I think that part of the processes that you mentioned is really about taking accountability for your business and your hiring process, and taking control over the environment that you end up creating for new hires.
Yeah. Absolutely. So what does the hiring process look like at Made Easy?
Man, it's so interesting that we're having this conversation, Lauren, because our listeners are seeing two different sides. They're seeing a B2B lens through you and Brian, and then we have our professional services industry, and there are two different hiring experiences and processes. So for Made Easy, I'm just going to speak right now specifically to our cleaning teams. For our cleaning teams, it's an application that they find either through Craigslist. Prior, it was like Indeed. It directs them to our website. We have a hiring page on our website. Again, we have really bright imagery of what's in it for them. That's what we lead with, by the way. We were at first doing this whole like about Made Easy. Like, they don't care about that. That can go last.
Yeah.
We are going to tell you what's in it for you first. And then we also recently added like a frequently asked questions to help preempt some of the questions we might get in an interview. So they fill the application out. It gets sent to our ATS, applicant tracking system. We then vet them. And quite honestly, let's say an applicant comes in at 8 a.m. I'm already calling them, or our HR assistant is already calling them within the next few hours. There's no waiting at all. Schedule that interview. It's a phone interview with me, but it is transitioning to our HR. She's not even an HR assistant. I'm sorry. She's more of an HR generalist. with a focus in recruiting and hiring.
Mm-hmm.
So 30-minute phone interview, and our interviews are so loose, right? Because of the nature of the work. I don't care about where you worked necessarily. I don't care about certain aspects of the job in that regard. I just want to confirm essentially that you definitely have cleaning experience. And then the biggest parts for me, or pieces for me, are the behavioral questions that we ask. Because we're hiring contractors, we essentially have to inform them that we're entering a partnership together. And so we need insight on how they would treat people, how they treat customers, how they treated past customers, and things like that is more important for us than the actual cleaning. Now, they have to have cleaning experience, don't get me wrong, but we're not focused on that experience in detail. So then everything checks out. We ask them to submit several references so we can check that as well. And sometimes we know how references are. They aren't always available to talk to. So a large part of the reference check is just another step in the process to show how serious they are about moving forward. That's it. Then they go through that process, and then they have an orientation where we do introduce our full policies and procedures in an hour meeting. That is now changing to a module, to a course.
Okay.
So it'll be a recorded video versus them needing to come in person or have access to Zoom for an hour long. And it'll be a self-paced module course that they take that will teach them the policies and procedures. They have two like mini assessments in between each module. And then once they complete that orientation, they'll have all the other steps, background check, setting up their availability, and they're pretty much onboarded into our ecosystem. They don't meet with Marcus at all. And the goal is to make it a kind of step 1, step 2, step 3, and we go through the entire process. I'm sure we're going to tweak it and play with it. But the reason why we're doing it that way is to not monopolize too much of my time or our HR generalist time, which what we found in this hiring process is even when people do get to the final orientation, once they've heard all of our processes and policies, they still decide to tap out. And so much of the time is being dedicated to these orientations because it's a lot of information, right? A lot of, again, trying to set everyone up for success. And if there's something with regard to our policies or procedures that they don't gel with or they don't like, we want to minimize any lost time between that orientation and then ultimately getting onboarded. And so that's why we're going in this direction. It's worked for a lot of other companies in our industry. So again, we've really just been open to tweaking things along the way. Our process has not changed drastically. This course would be something that would shake things up, and we'll really see if there's value from someone being present, like me or our HR person, or if we can just move right along and have this course and they take it at their own pace.
What are like a couple things or a few things that you found have worked in coming up with the hiring process? And what are some things that maybe didn't work?
Our rapid response definitely works. Hands down, that's one of the best things, is responding quickly to qualified applicants. What hasn't worked, I would say, probably where we were posting initially, like where we were posting our original job descriptions. They probably weren't the best places to advertise or sponsor our openings. What else?
It's fine if there's only a couple things.
Yeah, no, I know, I'm only pausing because I feel like a lot of shit hasn't worked. That we've continued to modify or adjust. And I think for us, it's really just been trying to nail this formula down in a way that's very easy, very standard, and can maximize who we get. And like you said earlier, it's definitely about quality over quantity. And that's what we're shooting for.
Yeah, I think for us, the biggest thing was having the final demo. So having that portion of our hiring process that shows they can and demonstrates that they can do the job that they're being hired for. Because someone's ability to interview is, you can learn things about them and the behavioral questions are super helpful. But if you're able to have them actually do a portion of what they would be doing on the job, I think that is telling. I know that like software engineers usually have to write some code. I know when I was a social media manager, when I was interviewing at Salesforce, they had me write up like a couple of example tweets. So things like that. So because we had a consultant, we were having them demo what it would be like that would as them consulting. So that was probably the biggest thing that worked. Things that didn't work, I guess where we posted, we could have probably done more work on where we posted, maybe doing more individual outreach or putting some ad money behind it, having more patience because we were trying to hire as quickly as we could. So those are the things that I hope to improve in the next go around. Oh, and what didn't work was also having searching for contractors. We got so few candidates. So we haven't quite figured out if we want to even go that route or if we would hire in that way. Because there are some people on our radar. So we're not always hiring, but we're in touch with people who reach out, and we have a couple people in our networks who we keep an eye on, who we have in mind. And that could be a way to, start as a contractor and do it because you're already aware of them instead of having to try to just take a pool of applicants and do it. But yeah.
One of the things that we learned, I think, in this process is the hiring process goes beyond screening, recruiting, vetting, and then ultimately interviewing. There's that onboarding process, and then there's the follow-up to the onboarding process and getting that feedback to see exactly how the experience went for them or if there's anything that we can improve upon. I think a lot of our contractors, despite attending or going through the orientation, learning about our policies and procedures, having tons of information at their disposal, some of them felt ultimately like they still weren't completely set up for success. They were nervous getting to the job. And it's just, I would imagine any person who's been a receptionist, you've answered phones before, but for some reason it's nerve-wracking when you start at a new company and you're trying to get those first day jitters out. I think that's the same, even for people who have been doing a certain job for a long period of time and you're working within a new infrastructure, a new company. What can we do to make those initial days as smooth as possible?
That really matters, because I think I've mentioned this before in this season. I've been in environments where it was very structured and I thrived, and environments where there was not a lot of process. It was very ad hoc or figure it out yourself, and I did not do well. I did good enough, but it was a shitty experience for me and the people around me, and there was turnover because of it. So I'm the same person, I'm the same hardworking, if I can be successful here, then theoretically you should be able to be successful over here. And the only difference was process. So that is something that Brian and I have learned the hard way.
I know we have the same problem, but in the opposite. Marcus loves processes and procedures, but so much so that it can take forever to implement them. And that's where you have abandoned processes and procedures or incomplete processes and procedures. And we felt the pain of that too. And so we're doing better about managing the implementation of that and soliciting the help of our admin staff and delegating a bit more. I think for someone like Marcus, when that's all he's focused on, he doesn't have anyone to rein him in, he can be building out a process for months. And we have a pressing need and I can get it implemented really quickly. It might mean that we might need some tweaks, and I would prefer things to be as close to perfect as possible. But I also understand that sometimes you have demand and you have to build the plane while it's flying. Not preferred, but I think that when you have someone like Marcus or someone like me, if we come together, we can have the best of both worlds, essentially. Yeah,
have that balance. I did want to ask one other thing, because you brought up earlier how your industry tends to have high turnover, which is why you're always hiring. What is that length of time before you see someone turn over and leave? Just out of curiosity.
Great question. So in the sales game, which I know Brian's familiar with, the term is always be closing. And the cleaning industry, or I would say any labor industry, the same concept applies, except it's always be hiring. And that's because with the competition between gig economies, the nature of the work being really tough on the body, and sometimes not having the flexibility to do things remotely, people are forced to make hard decisions. So I would say the average turnover, maybe 3 to 6 months.
Okay. Yeah. That's some pretty quick turnover.
Yeah. You'll have some people who just don't even make it the first week or 2 weeks. Some people who have inflated their cleaning experience we steer away from people who say they love cleaning or who say that they keep their house perfect. And that is so subjective, right? Because your level of dirt is not going to be the same as a level of dirt in some of our customers' homes. Those are usually red flags for us when they say they just love to clean. They've always done it. So yeah, that 3 to 6 month turnover is tough. We just did a list of all of our professional cleaners and how long they've been with us. And we are, I feel lucky in the sense that we have cleaners who have been with us close to the beginning of us starting, which is nice. Then we've had those who've been around for 2 years and a year and a half. And we have several that are meeting or reaching that 6 month mark now. And again, we have a few people that we're currently in the process of hiring now. We're hiring literally every day. It's never on pause.
Yeah.
Maybe when the pandemic took place.
That's so interesting. That's something that Brian and I haven't come across yet. We know it's going to happen. Like, we know that employees aren't going to stay at one, or at least are less likely to stay at one company for their entire career. So I don't know what we're going to do when, it'll happen.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see how we deal with it when it does. So
what I've learned for us is it always feels like in our industry, we're always also challenged with how long we should keep certain people around. Can we train them, or can we help them, or how can we improve their, not even just quality, but how can we improve like them being more responsive or better communicators, and we all, I think, have gut feeling of when someone's not going to work out, but we probably keep them on longer than we should because we're feeling the pinch of scheduling demands and stuff like that. I have to say that anytime that one of our cleaners chose to left on their own, or when we chose to let cleaners go, it somehow in some weird way works out. It always is fine.
Yeah.
And sometimes you tell yourself that, this person can't leave, or what the hell am I going to do? Like, we got to hurry up and find somebody. Some weird way, if you have a lot of systems and processes buttoned up, it works out.
Yeah.
And you will continue to live on, and you will continue to make money the next day. I think it's important to remember that, because you are going to, some of those longstanding cleaners that we have, they're going to move on to greener pastures, and that's fine. And we can only appreciate the work that they're doing for us now and show them that we're grateful, and always just keep that in the back of our minds.
Nice. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about regarding the hiring process?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on, I think for a lot of small businesses, depending on what your company is, I'm not sure if we think about hiring soon enough. I know that we can't wait to get away from doing a lot of the stuff on our own, or we want to just be working on our business, not in our business, but I'm not sure. And when we're plotting and scheming, if we are thinking in depth about hiring. But just like anything else out there, there are a plethora of resources and templates and kind of models you can pull from in terms of starting up your hiring process. That's what we've done. I'm not a big fan of reinventing the wheel. I am always trying to either make slight tweaks or changes considering the differences in the industries or businesses that we're benchmarking or going off of. But a lot of people have already put in the grunt work ahead of you, and it's just really important to utilize that and not steer away from it. Sometimes when things are working, it's working. And I think entrepreneurs, we can doubt that process because it's not what we've envisioned or not what we thought or how we thought it should go. But really rely on some of the teachings and knowledge that others have shared. And it's out there, like you said. You can Google it, research it. It's there.
Yeah, I think the main point is to actually put in the work and effort and research, because who you bring onto your company will have, again, a big impact on the success or failure of your company. And winging the hiring process or not putting as much thought or effort into it could end up really hurting you.
And I will say this too, and I don't think you and Brian have experienced this yet, which is great. If you have an initial gut feeling about a candidate, I implore you to probably listen to that feeling.
Well, you are more intuition based
you.
in decision making.
I am intuition based, and I am also very compassionate. So sometimes I will ignore that gut feeling based on information I glean from somebody, and it doesn't always serve me well. But I've just learned that those red flags, like I love to clean or this or that or whatever those red flag comments might be for you, listen to that and don't feel like you have to make a temporary fix now, because you're going to continue to have problems, and you're just going to eventually, sadly, waste your time. So listen to your gut feelings about candidates. Even with that said, we are understanding. We know that shit happens. So like, I'm not so hung up sometimes if a candidate is late to an interview or something's happened. I give them an opportunity. We actually do have our orientation course or something of the sort reserved in like a training course that we can send a link to. And I use that as an opportunity to say, if you're serious about this, then take this self-paced course, and then we can resume the process.
I think because I consider lateness a bad sign.
Yeah.
I do not think that's a
too.
good start. Like,
I agree.
Like, it can be
and I just
forgiven, but I don't know. It's one of those things where if you're not prioritizing your time and you're not prioritizing this interview, it's not going to disqualify someone, obviously, but you're already off to a bad start in my eyes.
Oh yeah, it's definitely noted. And then there's weird situations when we do the phone interviews. I'm not sure if you've ever had this, but we literally have people driving in their car, taking the phone interview, and it's okay, a little distracted there and stuff like that. So I agree. It's definitely a sign of whether or not someone is prioritizing this position, if they are good at prioritizing at all, managing their time. But yeah, I've moved away from that kind of finite, okay, you're disqualified, I want nothing to do with you, like attitude. But yeah, give them a chance to make it up. And if it might be a good practice, if you have something that is possible for them to make it up, or at least give them another chance. If they fuck that up, then they're on their own. But yeah, I did have one final question to wrap this up. We saw that so much has changed over the last year with regard to hiring, and quite honestly, employees demanding certain asks of employers. How do you think, or how do you plan to continue to adapt to the hiring needs among all of these changes that are happening?
I think mostly it's just keeping an eye on them. Like, we're not always hiring like you guys are. The next time we end up needing to hire, I'll again do a little bit of research, and I already think that there's always room to improve. I already feel like we're on the more progressive side of these hiring practices.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. Same. I think just keeping an eye and being aware of what's happening in the landscape, not ignoring the signs. Until next time, thank you guys. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, all the things. Find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and connect with me and Lauren on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Lauren.